Hey, it's Jay. This is the third and final chapter of the hardware store video series that I shot. The first two were building the base cabinets and the upper cabinets, but I did do some other stuff in between. There's a bunch of extras that I added to the hardware store over time, and so this one's a little out of time sequence. Overall, the hardware store has been transformative to my shop. It just has made an amazing difference to have all this stuff that was collected over the years out of the way and organized and indexed and ready for me to use. So, let's get to it. I just finished cleaning off this bench, installing this vise, doing some other work. And all this stuff used to live on this bench, and I'm refusing to put it back on there. So it's time for me to make storage for all this stuff. In order to make the storage for all these spray cans, I need to use the table saw to cut thin strips. So it's all going to be thin stuff. So I can keep it over on this side of the table saw, but I still have that epoxy over there. So first things first, I'm going to make a small storage shelf for the epoxy. It's going to go right back here. So the first step is I lay out my epoxy containers on a piece of scrap, and that's going to become the size of my base for this storage unit. So the answer is about 6 inches deep and about that wide. So out of the scrap bin, I also pulled some of these. So I'll put those like that, cut them off where I need to. Bada bing, bada bang. Really fun to go into a shop and not really have a plan and just sort of start cutting wood up and making something out of it. Makes for an enjoyable beginning of the day. French cleat problems, they're always full of dust. A little space cleared on my outfeed table. It's time to start cutting up parts for the spray can rack. At this point, the spray can rack is going very smoothly. I'm getting all the parts cut up and making the frame for it. Well, that was disappointing. That's all the video footage I happen to have of that build. But no worries. I decided to build another one to go on the top cabinets. So here's another build of a spray can rack. This rack was built entirely out of solid wood since I had run out of all the plywood from the base cabinet and upper cabinet builds by this point. Timeline not consistent. Everything was going really smooth as I was rolling along, just planing down the wood and getting it ready. Yikes, what was that? I hope I didn't throw a tooth off of my bird cutter head. Well, looking around, I didn't really see anything, so it was time to put the thing temporarily back together and see what happened. At the time, I didn't even hear it clear its throat. I just heard it clean up as it was running. But It must have been something caught up inside the fan on the planer. It has its own dust extraction fan, and I think it was probably a piece of a knot or something from that gnarly cherry. So, reassemble and back to work. So with the wood all prepped, I'm starting to make parts. I'm cutting all the pieces to actual width here. Now I'm cutting out the frame. It's going to be 2 long sides and then top, bottom, and a couple of shelves. Next up, a little layout. I use my drawings for this thing to figure out where all the shelves go and mark it up so I can get ready to hit the domino. Seems like every time I go to use this domino, I want to mark where there isn't one. So it's time to make my own. That's the one right there that I really want. I'll take one there too. There. And there. Again. Alright, that'll work. See it right there? We'll mark on the top too. So I use this little scrap to mark where I want the dominoes on each shelf. And then it's on to actually cutting the dominoes. Now for the shelves, I want to use the reference for the domino as the base of the domino. And then after I cut all those, I'll change over and I will use the fence of the domino as the reference for the top and bottom pieces, since that's how I'm going to do it on the main cabinet sides themselves. So here I am marking out and cutting the domino slots for the top of the cabinet on one of the sides. And you can see how I'll be using the fence on the domino as the reference for that particular piece. And now I move on to marking and cutting the dominoes for the shelves on each of the side pieces. And here you can see how I'm using the base of the domino as the reference point for each of the shelves. And one side done. You'll see on this test fit that I am taking a block plane and cutting down each of the dominoes. What I found was my domino was a little bit out of alignment. I might have gotten overly excited when I put the line on my domino to make the marks, but because I think it might just be a little out of alignment itself. So I'm going to have to send it into Festool, I think, and get them to fix it. Now I'm going to do a quick test cut on the drill press. I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole not all the way through and make sure that the dowels that I want to use fit. into the hole, and it does. So now I'm going to go ahead and get the front and the back, and what I'm going to do is drill all the way through the back and then into the front piece, but the front piece is only going to go partial depth so that the dowel won't stick out the front, but it will be able to slide right in through the back. I really should have clamped this stuff down to the table, because when I went through, the piece kind of stood up and, I don't know, kind of burned some stuff, but it wasn't bad. Now I'm putting a round over on all the shelves, and then I'm going to put a round over on the side pieces as well. And you'll see when I do the inside of the side pieces, I do a lot of skipping around because I don't want to get a round over right where the shelves are. So I do the round over down to where the next shelf starts, then I stop for a second and go and do it again and do it again. When I'm all done and assembled, I'll tune it all up with sandpaper and get rid of the little ridges that are left. And now for something that I get more requests for than anything else, some sanding footage. I'm just kidding. I don't actually get any requests, but I'm sure everybody wants to see it. Alright, I'll just show this one piece, but I'm warning you, there was a bunch more sanding and a full nother grit that you guys are missing out on. With a bunch of nice smooth pieces, I'm going to glue it up. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the dowels cut to size. As long as I'm waiting on glue to dry, I might as well get something done. I'll take the dowels over to the bandsaw after I mark them and cut them there. Real quick and easy. Yay, a little more sanding. What do you know? With all the major joinery smoothed out, now I'm going to work on those sections that I skipped when I was on the router table. And I'm going to go ahead and add roundovers right to the edge of the shelves and make them look right. Now it's time for finish. It's always satisfying to see the finish go on to some nice cherry. Even if it isn't that nice a cherry and it's B grade cherry that I'm using on a shop project, still looks really nice when I put the finish on it. Several years ago I made a ton of wedges out of various types of wood on the bandsaw. Every now and then I grab one of those to wedge something in, and here I am just cutting smaller slices of wedges to wedge those dowels into the sides of the cabinet. I cut a slot at the bandsaw into the end of each dowel about 3/4 inch thick, about the thickness of the side of the cabinet, maybe just slightly under that. And then when I stick it in, I can throw a wedge in there and pound it in, and it's going to lock the dowel in place. Now I can flush cut up everything and move on to installing this thing. Alright, out here in the shop annex, I am going ahead and putting the cabinet up with the new rack attached to the side. You can see on the bottom the old rack is still there. I did actually finish it, even though there is no footage to prove that that's the case. Here's some super smooth video of my spray can racks attached to the side of the hardware store. Time for more time travel. Here I am, I'm talking about sorting stuff into my bins and how I need these drawers. Pull out these drawers, get out the bins, sort, and then push these back in. And I specifically put these locking drawer slides in there for that. So that's what I have left to do on this, and that's what my plan is for the day. I shot a very comprehensive build video on building these drawer units for the hardware store. Each of them consists of a bunch of different compartments, and I'll show you the design at the very end and show you why I did it that way. But it turned out to be a pretty complicated thing, and one of the reasons I did it the way I did it was to sort of prove out my domino skills and improve them and see what I could do with it. It really didn't need to be built this sturdy or strong, and I'm just going to kind of gloss over it here because it's kind of more of the same of what's been going on. I think someday I may release the more complete video of this thing, but for now this video of all this stuff in the final hardware store outro is going to be long enough without all of that information. But I've gone and I've built a base and then a whole bunch of dividers and a frame around it, and the plan was that every single one of these drawers could be used either upside down or right side up, because it's really a shelf to sort things on, put bins on, open them up, and they're on locking drawer slides so that you can do that. But I will go over that a bit more when all's said and done and they're out and installed. Whew, that's a lot of glue. Well, I had filmed a whole version of this video ending that had me doing all the test fitting of these drawers and the heights and going back and forth to the shop and running my annex intro over and over and over again. And I have to admit, it was pretty funny, but it started to annoy even me as I was trying to edit this thing. But here I am, finally putting these drawers in. Nice. And yeah, it's not even too bad. Alright, here it is. It's several months after I finished all this stuff, and you can see I've made a mess of my hardware store. But I haven't done a project that's been quite as transformative to my shop as this. I don't know, maybe ever. Turning my shop into a place to do stuff and not a place to store stuff has been a huge change. I had the luxury of having this annex to be able to bring these shelves out here, but I wasn't thinking that way when I first designed this, and I had it planned to go in the shop. I had a spot set aside for it, so it still would have been equally transformative, I think. Anyway, the way this whole thing works, I've got all the bins that we've talked about in the previous videos. I've got these drawers that come out, and they've got all these compartments in them. In these compartments, I tend to have these little baggies, little Ziploc baggies full of stuff that I can put hardware in. So if I need to grab a certain screw, I can bring down screw bins. And if I need these particular screws here, I can pop these out and take them where I want to use them. If that's further away, if I know I'm going to go somewhere and use them and I don't want to haul this bin around or spill them or anything, I can just reach in here, grab a thing, put them in there. And also, one of the things I've found that I do is, if I have a little thing full of nuts and bolts, these are ones waiting to be sorted, I can pour them into these compartments here, sort them here, put them in the right bin, take the bins, move them up and down, and use this as a workspace. Which is why, because I knew the rest of this was just going to be covered. That's just the way horizontal surfaces work. You have one, it's covered. Now the only thing I don't like about this design with these locking things is, if I'm one-handed, I can't open or close them because I have to move both of these things. So sometimes if I lean a little on it, I can get it to release and go in. But getting it to come back out, especially if I'm holding a couple of these and I've got them like this and I want to just get that out, I can do this and to get one hand free. It's really hard to try to keep pressure on here and move it, and I tend to have to set them down somewhere to get one of those out so I can stack them there and then sort them back into their slots. So that's the downside to these locking drawer slides. If I had a choice, the drawer slides would only lock out, but for the price, all I could get were these. Now I'm just going to kind of do a general overview of the hardware store. You can see on the side there's these spray can racks. You can see in one of them I had some tape. It's not an ideal way to store tape. It's one of the things I'd like to add to this is some better tape storage specifically. But you can see the upper cabinets, lower cabinet here, and then I'll pan back up here to the upper cabinet and you can see all the different bins in there. That center section is where I'd like to put some tape storage. It may eventually become another upper cabinet, or I may just put a bunch of different modules in there to store different things. At this point I'm kind of showing off the drawer configuration. You can see I made those compartments so that no matter where I put one of those bins, it's going to fit. I could slide it to one side or the other side and it's still going to have 3 or 4 points of contact to make sure that the bin is always going to be stable on it. That's why the compartments are sized the way they are. They weren't for any specific purpose. And you can see I have to use 2 hands to open this one, and it's got my label maker in it. And I've been starting to stash batteries for my cameras in there as well. Now that I have the hardware store done and several other shop projects done, maybe I'll build something that actually leaves the shop. Anyway, thank you for watching. I don't know, do I want to promise building something that leaves the shop?